Welcome to another episode in my series where I investigate each Georgia county and bring y'all their most haunted location. This episode brings us to the Central State Hospital in Baldwin County, Georgia. Central State Hospital in Milledgeville, Georgia is one of the oldest and most notable psychiatric hospitals in the United States. It has a rich and complex history reflecting changes in mental health care practices and societal attitudes toward mental illness. Central State Hospital, originally known as the Georgia Lunatic Asylum, was established in 1837 by legislative act as one of the first state mental hospitals in Georgia. It officially opened in 1842 with the admission of its first patient. The hospital was intended to serve those suffering from mental illness as well as individuals with epilepsy and other neurological conditions. The idea was to provide care, treatment, and a safe place for individuals who were otherwise left in jails and poorhouses. Early treatment approaches were rudimentary, including restraint, confinement, and moral therapy, a form of humane psychological treatment focusing on compassionate care and regular routines. By the turn of the 20th century, the hospital began to grow rapidly. This was partly due to societal changes, including increased urbanization, which brought mental health issues more into the public eye. In 1897, the hospital was renamed the Georgia State Sanitarium, and in 1929 it became known as the Milledgeville State Hospital. Eventually, it would adopt the name Central State Hospital. During this period, the hospital expanded its facilities significantly, often in response to overcrowding. In the 1950s, Central State Hospital was one of the largest mental health institutions in the world, with more than 12,000 patients and nearly 6,000 staff members. The hospital's campus was like a small city, complete with its own power plant, farms, and even a cemetery. The mid-20th century saw a shift in treatment methods from moral therapy and custodial care to more medical approaches, including electroconvulsive therapy, lobotomies, and the introduction of psychiatric drugs such as Thorazine. Beginning in the 1960s, a national movement toward deinstitutionalization, shifting mental health care from large institutions to community-based settings, began to influence Central State Hospital. This was due to a combination of factors including concerns over patient rights, the development of psychiatric medications, and the desire to integrate individuals with mental illness back into society. As a result of deinstitutionalization and the changes in state policies, the patient population at Central State Hospital began to decline. Many patients were transferred to community-based settings or returned to live with their families. During the 1970s and 1980s, many of the older buildings on the hospital's campus were closed, and the hospital's role shifted primarily to acute care, forensic services, and residential care for individuals with severe and persistent mental illness. In the early 2000s, the state of Georgia continued to downsize the hospital in favor of community-based mental health services. Many of the remaining long-term care units were closed, and the number of patients continued to decline. Today, Central State Hospital focuses on providing forensic services as well as specialized services for individuals with developmental disabilities and those requiring long-term mental health care. While much of the campus has been closed or repurposed, efforts have been made to preserve some of the historic buildings. The site is often studied by historians, sociologists, and those interested in the history of mental health care in the United States. Throughout its history, Central State Hospital has been the subject of numerous criticisms, particularly regarding patient care, overcrowding, and the use of controversial treatments. Here's a little history on the paranormal activity associated with the Central State Hospital. The hospital saw thousands of patients pass through its doors, many of whom suffered from severe mental illness, epilepsy, and developmental disabilities. The hospital also housed criminals and those deemed socially undesirable. The harsh conditions, combined with experimental treatments such as lobotomies and electroshock therapy, created an atmosphere of suffering and despair. This backdrop has fueled many of the ghost stories associated with the hospital. Central State Hospital has a massive burial ground that is home to over 25,000 unmarked graves scattered across its vast grounds. Many patients who died there were buried without much ceremony, sometimes with only a number marking their final resting place. This fact contributes to the perception that the spirits of these patients might still linger on the hospital grounds. Many of the hospital's older buildings, now abandoned, are believed to be the most haunted. This includes the Powell Building, the Walker Building, and the Jones Building. These structures were once wards for the criminally insane and held patients undergoing intense treatments. Known for its imposing architecture, the Powell Building is often cited as a hotspot for paranormal activity. Visitors have reported hearing disembodied voices, strange noises, and footsteps when no one is present. Some have claimed to see ghostly apparitions or figures in the windows. The Walker Building is also known to be haunted, particularly in the basement and the attic areas. People have reported feeling sudden drops in temperatures, seeing shadowy figures, and hearing screams or cries that seem to come from nowhere. The Jones Building was one of the main wards for patients and is infamous for its long, dark hallways. Reports of apparitions dressed in period clothing, doors opening and closing on their own, and the sounds of dragging footsteps are common. Some say they've seen the ghost of a nurse who reportedly died there while on duty. The unmarked graves spread across the hospital grounds has given rise to ghost stories as well. Witnesses have reported seeing figures standing among the graves or feeling an eerie presence when walking near them. Some paranormal investigators believe that these spirits are those of former patients who died without proper acknowledgement or care. Many visitors and paranormal enthusiasts have claimed to see apparitions of former patients roaming the halls or peering from the windows. These apparitions are often described as wearing hospital gowns or old-fashioned clothing. Numerous reports exist of people hearing disembodied voices throughout the hospital grounds, especially in the hallways and patient rooms. These voices are sometimes described as whispering or crying, and in some instances they have been reported to call out for help or utter unintelligible phrases. Some visitors have experienced objects moving on their own, doors slamming shut, and even being touched by unseen forces. There have been reports of flashlights turning on and off without cause and personal belongings being moved. A common report among those who visit the hospital is a profound feeling of unease or dread, particularly in the areas where patients were once confined or treated. Some people have described feeling as though they were being watched or followed. Unexplained cold spots and sudden drops in temperature are also frequently reported. Over the years, numerous paranormal investigators have explored Central State Hospital using various tools like EVP recorders, EMF meters, and infrared cameras to capture evidence of paranormal activity. Some groups claim to have recorded unexplained noises, voices, and ghostly apparitions. The hospital has been featured in several paranormal investigation shows and documentaries, which have brought national attention to the site. Shows like Ghost Hunters and Paranormal Lockdown have highlighted Central State Hospital as a significant location for paranormal activity, further cementing its reputation as a haunted site. A persistent local legend tells of a nurse who continues to haunt one of the hospital's wards. According to the story, she was a beloved figure who cared deeply for her patients and died tragically at the hospital. Her ghost is said to wander the halls, especially at night, checking on her patients and ensuring they're cared for. Another popular tale involves a dark, shadowy figure often seen in the corners of rooms or lurking in the shadows. Known simply as the Shadow Man, this entity is said to instill a sense of fear and unease into those who encounter it. Some believe it to be the spirit of a troubled former patient. While many embrace the ghost stories and paranormal reports associated with Central State Hospital, others remain skeptical. Some attribute the experiences to the power of suggestion, the eerie atmosphere of the abandoned hospital, and the natural sounds of old buildings settling or animals moving around. The hospital's dark history, combined with its dilapidated state and the knowledge of past suffering, can lead to heighten the perception of supernatural occurrences. Today, access to the Central State Hospital and its grounds is restricted, partially due to safety concerns and to preserve the integrity of the site. However, it remains a popular destination for those interested in ghost hunting and paranormal research, with numerous unofficial tours and investigations taking place. The stories of paranormal activity at Central State Hospital continue to fascinate and attract visitors, whether they are believers in the supernatural or just intrigued by the hospital's history and eerie ambiance. The site serves as a reminder of both the history of mental health treatment in the U.S. and the powerful allure of ghost stories and folklore. Central State Hospital's legacy as a site of paranormal activity is deeply intertwined with its historical context, the experiences of people who lived and worked there, and the continuing fascination with the unexplained. That's all I have for y'all today. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, remember, next time you're alone in the dark, listen closely. You might not be as alone as you think. Follow for more chilling tales and stay haunted, my friends.